My father was a big influence, although he always said, like I guess most fathers, it's fine to be a musician, but get something to back you up in bad times. And but he was very conscious. He played trombone and baritone sax a bit. And when he was home from work as an accountant, was what he did. He, I think he had his life sorted out. So I think he had something like 20 minutes for eating, 20-minute nap, and 20-minute practice. Kind of like jazz, but I mean, he was more the Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, big dance bands. And I guess he liked a lot of Dixieland, but I think the stuff I tried to play was, he never said, but I think it wasn't his cup of tea, I don't think. I studied, I guess you could call it strict counterpoint in Toronto with I guess one of Canada's prominent composers, who I think is still alive, called John Weinswag. And I studied harmony from the Hindemith book of traditional harmony with him. And that's about all the studying I did in Canada. Trumpet playing, I just stumbled around in the dark trying to get better. And I wanted to go. I heard you should go to New York to study off one of the big guys, but I never had the money or the nerve to do that story. But I had loads of day jobs in Canada, trying to please my father again, in banks, insurance offices, anything. But I always went home after 3 months with, I couldn't take any more of it. Or usually I could do whatever job they gave me in 3 months. I could do it in an hour and I had to pretend the rest of the day I was working. So finally he found this course you could take in Montreal, McGill University. I had every subject I needed from high school except English. Although now I think I would get it because I love English now, but I had some reason I couldn't pass it. Anyway, if you went to the school and did this music course, you could end up as a high school teacher who taught music, but you'd have to teach other subjects because there was no jazz schools in those days. So I had the money for the first term in my pocket and walked around McGill University and told myself, I said, I can't be a high school teacher, I don't want to be one, and I didn't know what to do. But then I ran into a guy I went to high school with, who's now quite known in the music and jazz world, Gene Lees. He's a lyricist.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, well, all the big bands are happening in England. They need brass players over there, so that's all I needed. So I bought a ticket on the boat and went to England. But to get to enable me to do this course, if I had gone, I had to get up to grade 8 on piano, which is quite technical. And so while I was in Montreal, he liked to sing, Gene Lees, and he kind of in the Frank Sinatra tradition. He wasn't all that great, but we went around Montreal to a few different clubs, and I played piano for him, and he sang. And he said, "Will you go to England? I'll be over in 6 months, and we'll form a little trio." But actually, he never did arrive, so I'm still waiting. So that's how I got my piano up a little bit at that time. When I left, the Korean War was on, and I would have been eligible for the draft. And I thought, well, maybe I won't get in the band. Maybe they'll give me a gun and send me over there, So that's why I didn't go to the States. I was thinking of going somewhere exotic like Cuba or South America, but in the end I chickened out. I thought, well, I better go somewhere English. And when Gene Lee said that was the incentive to go to England. I started to find out where the local jazz clubs were, and I think I went to it wasn't called a Mapleton, I forget what it's called, but it was a place where people like Joe Harrod and Tony Crombie. The first night I went down there, Leon Calvert was playing, and Dizzy Reese, I think. So I went down there quite regular for 4 or 5 days, but then my money started to run out. But I think being the age I was, 22, somehow things like that don't bother you so much. But there was a guy working in the club, I think he was a guy who took the coats into the room or something. Somehow he started to talk to me, and I kind of mentioned that I was running out of money. So he said, well, I could come and stay with him for a while. So I went to stay with him, and then after a few weeks, I found out, I don't know how I found out about a place called Archer Street, but it used to be a street where every Monday afternoon was like a marketplace. All musicians would end up there, and you could actually find work. Some people would walk around and say, I need a third trumpet player, or do you know a saxophone player? So somebody asked me, I think, it was for a band called Roy Fox. That was the first band I played in on third trumpet, I guess. So that's how I got started working. But that wasn't until maybe, I arrived in October of 52, and then at Christmas time they took on extra help because they needed it for the Christmas rush. So I worked in the post office over Christmas. I think I found this street in something like February, and then I joined Roy Fox, and then I got a summer job on the Isle of Wight with a saxophone player called Freddie Courtney. And that also in March of that year I got married, so my wife came with me to the Isle of Wight. Well, I think first of all, maybe through my father and fiddling around the radio station for jazz programs, I got to like a lot of the, the Muggsy Spaniards, the Dixieland guys. Was it Wilbur de Paris?
Wilbur de Paris, yeah.
Didn't he have a brother? Or no?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Sydney.
all those, Red Allen, but then I started to hear, people like Roy Eldridge and Buck Clayton, so that changed me a bit. But then when I was, I think, 15, we moved to a place in Ontario called St. Catharines. Before that, we had moved around Ontario quite a bit because the economy wasn't very good in Canada. My father was always trying to find a new job. But I was always a loner. I never had many friends. I think that's what attracted me a lot to jazz, because for some reason, it's not true, but I just had the feeling that these people were loners and different somehow. So when I got to St. Catharines for the first time in my life, I met a bunch of young guys my age, and they started telling me about this new music they were hearing, bebop. And they played a Charlie Parker record for me, and Dizzy, which the first time I didn't like, but I was so happy to have finally a group of friends that I got to like it very quick. I was affected a lot by Paul Hindemith's, what's it called, Methester Mahler or something. Well, there's parts of that to me which is very fourth sounding, almost like a little bit like McCoy Tyner. And in jazz, I suppose, I've always listened to the more orchestral people like Ellington, or even Stan Kenton I liked. It's not considered hip to say you like Stan Kenton, but I like that brassy orchestral thing. I also liked all the others, Basie and Woody Herman and all that, but I was more attracted to the Gil Evans, Duke Ellington bit. I guess John Dankworth must have found out about me from somewhere, from somebody. And I don't know if it was him, I think it was him actually, got in touch with me and asked if I wanted to join the band to go specifically to Newport, in the States, the Newport Jazz Festival. But as I said, I don't know how he found out about me. After a while, I did start to write for John's band. I don't know if he asked me or I asked him if I could do it. I think probably I asked him if I could do it. And I wrote one piece for him, I think it was called Embraceable You, which he liked a lot. But then after that, I wrote another couple of pieces I only heard through the grapevine. I think Ron Snyder, who played tuba in the band, said that John wasn't so impressed with the next pieces I did. So, and I wrote for the singer Bobby Breen, who was in the band. I did a couple of arrangements for him. But then I think I was just going on further, I guess, 1964 or 65. I had some wisdom tooth trouble and I couldn't play. The doctor said, don't play for 3 months. So John Dankworth said, would you like to write an album for the band? So that's when I did The Windmill Tilter, which has now become a collector's item, which if you can find one, you can get a couple of £100 for it, I hear, but hard to find it. The Globe Unity Orchestra was one of the first bands I played with in Germany. And that was usually like 2 or 3 trumpets and 2 or 3 trombones and 3 or 4 saxophones. We often rehearsed, what do you call it, those pieces you write when you just have diagrams, you don't have any notes.
Yeah, graphic scores.
Graphic pieces, yeah. And then sometimes we had no pieces at all and we just walked on and improvised. But in that situation, you almost had to fight if you really wanted a solo. So it was a good experience, but I'm glad. I enjoy doing it now, playing free. Occasionally I go and play with Evan Parker when he plays in London. He don't mind me sitting in, but you have to be in good shape because physically it's really hard. I mean, saxophone players can play it for an hour non-stop, but brass players, after 5 or 6 minutes, you got to stop, never rest. Yeah, playing with Anthony Braxton was, for me, a great experience. It was for about 2 or 3 years, from 1964 to 66 or so. And Dave Holland and Barry Arsenal were in the band. So he knew what he wanted. I mean, you could do whatever you wanted, but in a sense, you weren't completely free. You had to follow a bit his conception. At that time, I was very frustrated because I'd spent about 20 years trying to play strict bebop. And although I love it, it's my root, I could never do it. I don't know why, but probably just because I wasn't good enough. But I mean, I love Miles and Dizzy and all them. And I tried to play in that, and I couldn't do it. So I wasn't getting many jazz gigs. And there were people around, great players who could play that music, like Tubby Hayes, Jimmy Duker, Ronnie Scott, all them, you know. So I wasn't actually doing many jazz gigs, but I was frustrated. And then I found out about this place where these young guys were playing this new funny music. So I went along to listen one night and I hated it on sight, but I went back a couple of times and then they eventually said, do you want to sit in? I said, well, why not? So I just went berserk on the trumpet for about 10 minutes, and even to this day, I never know, I can't say if that music is good or bad. I just find it therapeutic. I get something out of my system. So I started to play a lot with those, you know, Evan Parkers, John Stevens, Tony Ockley, Derek Bailey, Barry Guy, all them. And that's how I got asked into Europe, first of all, because it was like a communal scene between Germany, Holland, and England mostly, I think, of people who played this kind of music. And they moved around to different countries, so that's how I got asked into Europe. It was a few years after I had been playing in Europe that they knew I could even play on a chord. So I've tried splitting the day up and saying, well, I'll practice for a couple of hours and write for a couple of hours, but it don't work. It seems I have to be either one or the other. So if I have a long period at home, normally I probably wouldn't practice for 4 or 5 days, but then I have to start practicing again, because if you let go for a week, to get your chops back is almost impossible. It's like you're a beginner again. So if I'm not working at night, I usually have to do, I'd say at least 3 hours a day just to keep level. But if you've got a gig at night, then maybe you'd only have to do 45 minutes or something. But I have to do that. I mean, I couldn't walk onto a gig without having warmed up or something. I could get through it, but it wouldn't sound very nice. As far as music goes, listen to what you like. With the music you love, just listen to that. I mean, even to this day, I still force myself to listen to something that probably I don't like, but not very often I don't do that. But I would advise young people to listen to what they like and, of course, practice a lot. But this is not going to be very good for school. I would say, if it was me and I was young, I would pick a musician who I really liked and bug him to teach me rather than go to a music school. That's about the only, and trumpet player as well. You can't get anywhere, you just have to practice, that's all.
What, you're probably aware of the sort of formalisation of jazz education now through the Jamie Aebersold and those kind of systems and that. What do you think about those?
Well, it's good in a sense. I mean, I've got a couple. I've got a Tom Harold one and a Bill Evans one. Well, I mean, if you practice alone, it's nice to put one of them on and play with it. Although most of the time I probably put on a Keith Jarrett trio, the standards one, and play with that. But Charles Alexander, I had a letter from him the other day, and he's asked me if I want to do a Jamie Aebersold record. I think, why not? But there must be some drawbacks to it, I suppose. But generally, as long as that's not your whole musical life. I mean, you can't spend 2 years at home with Jamie Aebersold and go out to play. You have to play with other people. It's because you don't know what they're going to do next. And Jamie Aebersold, you get to know what they're doing next. But playing in public with other people is very important, I think.